Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the Ferrario Face-Off here at Claibs Online. Of course, I'm Alex Ferrario, pre- and post-game host for the St. Louis Blues on the radio side. And with me, as always, is my good buddy Mike Claiborne to talk about a Blues team that, frankly, needs a lot of Band-Aids, frankly, needs a lot of whatever, I guess, magic potion makes people healthy, Claibs, because right now we are talking about anybody on the roster who's played in the NHL seems to be banged up.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for it, Alex. I mean, the compressed schedule has a lot to do with it. I think the way the protocols have worked, where players aren't as flexible as far as moving around and maybe getting more quality workouts in. Remember, you can't be at the rink before an hour and 45 minutes before game time.
Right.
And throw in the fact that because we're getting all these call-ups, those guys didn't play much hockey last year. So they're trying to catch up, and they were in a developmental stage. So when you add all those things up, you kind of have a perfect storm is what we're seeing with the St. Louis Blues. But I can promise you this, there will be some other teams that will deal with this same issue before this season's over with. And if you're a general manager or a player development person, you may have to stop and think about how you're going to program your players because they're going to probably be here sooner than you want them to be.
Well, and if you're a head coach like Craig Berube, you also have to kind of shift the game plan a little bit if you're running your NHL team, because for as much as Craig Berube's system works, we've seen it work in the NHL, Claibs, of that forecheck, that heavy hitting, the cycling of the puck. You also have to alter that a little bit, right? Because if you're bringing up an Austin Poganski, if you're bringing up a Mackenzie McEachran, if you're playing a Sammy Blais 19 minutes a night, that's not the same as when you have a Jaden Schwartz, a Tyler Bozak, or Robert Thomas on the ice. So you have to alter things a little bit, correct?
Oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think here's another thing that probably needs to be addressed. It may be time for the Blues to own their own minor league franchise.
Oh, yeah.
And probably, I know that the Peoria thing didn't end well, but you might want to have somebody close, a team that, because Utica, New York, it takes a stagecoach and 2 planes to get here. And what happens if you have open up a road trip out on the West Coast? By the time that guy gets there, we'll be halfway through that series.
Right.
So I really think they need to really explore that and maybe make it a regional. Maybe they team up with Nashville or somebody, but somebody. And the reason why I think they should have their own team is because you want to coach the style there that's going to be the one you're going to play in the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
And in that situation, to go out and to send 4 or 5 kids out to Utica, you don't know how it's working. I mean, granted, the Blues, I'm sure, have boots on the ground there, but to be able to emphasize a style that's going to be part of what they do at the next level, I think is even more important. So you probably need to have better control of that situation, especially the way the Blues do business, because they believe in developing from within and promoting from within. And maybe that's one of the reasons why some of these guys have a difficult adjustment when they get here, because I don't know if that's been harbored as much on that other level as it is here.
I think you're 100% on this, Claves, especially when it comes to development of these younger players. I mean, how much have we talked in the past of, well, who do they got coming up in the pipeline? And 9 times out of 10, they have players, but it's not top 6 players that you would expect to jump into a role. Now, some of that's because of where the Blues draft, but a perfect example is Klim Kostin right now, Claves. He's playing in the KHL because the Springfield Thunderbirds decided not to play this season. That was supposed to be the Blues AHL affiliate. So they had to send players to Utica. They knew that when you're sending players to another team's affiliate, they're not going to be getting the same ice time that they would on your own team. Yeah. So the Blues opted to send Klim Kostin over to the KHL and say, hey, now he can play as a top forward. Now, granted, Klim Kostin hasn't been great this season, but he's starting to turn things on. And if you need a player to step into a higher level role, I think Klim Kostin would have been that guy, but he doesn't have the AHL time right now.
In this day and age of COVID and trying to save money, I'm really surprised that the National Hockey League hasn't said to its owners, you guys need to form regional minor league systems where the East Coast will have, there's plenty of places there. You can't tell me that you couldn't put a team in Rockford and Springfield or Peoria or maybe Kansas City. Or even drift further south to put minor league teams there where it's easier from a travel standpoint, it's easier from an access standpoint, and you can basically put better eyes on your players. And there's enough teams and enough cities in this country that you could probably do that with, compared to worrying about what they're doing in Springfield, Massachusetts, or Utica, New York. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And for a league that's probably trying to save money and be more cost effective like everybody else, it just seems like a natural to me at this point. And if they didn't learn anything about COVID, hopefully this is something they wrote down and said, we need to probably be more proactive for something like this.
Yeah, this is something because this is the second time this has happened to the Blues, where basically their AHL affiliate didn't play the season or couldn't play, and then the Blues had to shift their players somewhere else. And then, of course, what most recently happened, where their AHL San Antonio team just upped and said, hey, we're going to Vegas because they purchased us. So I'm going to be interested if Tom Stillman and Doug Armstrong look at that a little bit deeper once COVID gets past, because obviously right now it's so tough because most teams are taking a massive hit. But in a couple of years, when things start to get back to normal and the NHL starts to see that salary increase, that would make an awful lot of sense. Because if you just use examples, Claibs, of like, let's look at the Detroit Red Wings right now. They're, of course, a bottom dweller in the league, but for so long, they were filtering players that were drafted 5th, 6th, 7th round, and they would play a couple of years in the AHL, and then next thing you know, boom, they're superstars on the NHL. That comes with growth when it comes to your AHL team and learning that system as soon as you transition into the Detroit system.
Well, you're absolutely right. The Red Wings didn't have a shuttle. Once you were here to stay. And that's one of the challenges that the Blues have had over time, where they would shuttle guys back and forth because they just weren't as close to being ready as we need them to be. But I think, as you said, the Red Wings had patience. They employed a system throughout their organization, and it worked. Now they're dealing with the situation now where because they had moved so many draft choices to get key players, it caught up to them along with a salary cap. And so now they're a little bit further near the top of the draft now. And you'll see that thing start to develop again. I mean, Steve Yzerman and people like that understand what it takes. So I don't think you'll see the Red Wings at the bottom of the pool very much longer.
Claibs, who do you think has the most impact on this Blues roster when he is not in the lineup?
Well, that's a great question. From a forward standpoint, obviously, I'm not going to talk about Tarasenko because he hasn't played. Jaden Schwartz is a good two-way player.
Yeah.
He'll never be the goal scorer I thought he was going to be, but he's a solid two-way player, and you need two-way players in this system that the Blues run. Defensively, I would think it would be Colton Parayko because of his size and what he does, but he hasn't played up to his size or his skill set, and obviously the back injury may have had a lot to do with it. But those are probably two of the key people that you need, especially because they eat up a lot of minutes and they're good in their own end. You know, the problem with the Blues has been they've been terrible in their own end with the giveaways and being out of position, and throw in the fact that no consistency offensively has put them in a bind. But if you ask any coach, you'd rather for a guy to be solid in his end instead of the other guy's end.
Yeah, well, you're 100% on it. So Colton Parayko was one I was going to say on the defensive side, because look at the goals that the Blues have been giving up, Claibs. I mean, they're getting outmanned. They're getting outworked from the opposition by Krug and Falk. But on the offensive side, I said that because of Jaden Schwartz. So I went and looked at this, Claibs. The Blues are 60 games over 500 when Jaden Schwartz is in the lineup. And on the flip side of that, they're 40 games under 500. And it's incredible to me to look at that record and say, man, how does a guy like Jaden Schwartz, who really doesn't put that many pucks in the net, have that much of an impact on the roster? But the more that you think about it, he is a spark plug. I mean, he is kind of that energy in the locker room for the Blues. When they see a Jaden Schwartz go out there and throw the body and forecheck and go to the front of the net, because that seems to be the Blues' issues right now. Guys don't want to go to that dirty area. Jaden Schwartz parks himself. It brings everyone else on board. I mean, Braden Shen is a better player when Jaden Schwartz is in the lineup. Ryan O'Reilly and David Perron are better players when Jaden Schwartz is in the lineup. And for me, it's crazy because you ask that question, or I ask that question, and most would think, well, obviously it's got to be Ryan O'Reilly. It's got to be Braden Shem. Very important pieces. But when Jaden Schwartz is in the lineup, this is a completely different hockey team.
Yeah, and on the O'Reilly's doorstep, I would already assume people would have known that Ryan O'Reilly was the most important player. So we're looking at guys that we need to have step up.
Correct.
And to touch on Schwartz for a minute, and I mentioned earlier, I thought he would score more goals. Mm-hmm. This guy has as many scoring opportunities as anybody. You almost wonder, does he have vision problems? Because there's always a reason on why he misses the net or he doesn't score, but his effort can't be substituted. And that's something that they continue to need because, quite frankly, Alex, I don't think this team has worked hard. I don't think they skate. I don't think they're focused. And, they're beating themselves mentally more than anything else in being in bad position. We talked about the turnovers and just probably making the one pass too many or taking the shot too early. I mean, there's so many things that you look at. And I'm not sure where that comes from. And, there's certain guys on this team that you ask yourself the question, and you use Jaden Schwartz, and we talked about him, two-way player, okay? He's going to be solid in his own end. Then I look at a guy like David Perron. If David Perron isn't scoring, then what good is he?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a good defender. He's a guy that he will play the body when he picks his spots. Mm-hmm. But I need guys who are back on each end. That's how the Blues develop their style of hockey, being able to play the heavy game and leaning on guys. And always look at how many times they make a guy stop and start. Mm-hmm. How many times do they make a guy change directions? How many times do they make a guy rush passing the puck? Those are the things that are important for the St. Louis Blues that I don't see enough of consistently. And we've already touched on the giveaways, which I can't remember an alleged good team called the St. Louis Blues who have that many critical giveaways. And I've been watching Blues hockey from day one. And again, I said good teams. I've seen some terrible teams give it away. Right. And I say, well, that's why they're terrible. But in this situation, this is allegedly a good team. Everybody around the league respects what they've been able to do. But for some reason, man, it is just not translating to the ice. And Craig Berube's giving everybody a chance. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing here. When you look at this team and all the call-ups, guess what? The National Hockey League, every night they designate there's going to be a 60-minute game. Who you put in the lineup is up to you. So if I'm Craig Berube, I say to these guys, hey, boys, there's minutes to be had out here. How many of them you're going to play depends on how you play. And I don't care whether you're 20 years old or 30 years old, the minutes are available. Whether you were in Utica last week or you were with the team last year, these minutes are available. You need to prove that you're worthy of getting those minutes. And I haven't seen enough guys have taken advantage of that opportunity.
No, you haven't. And that's been the hardest part for this Blues team. And I think that's why we're not seeing goals right now, because your top guys are gassed, Claibs. I mean, the last game, for example, against the LA Kings, Ryan O'Reilly finished the game with about 23 minutes of ice time. Braden Shen finished with about 24 and a half minutes. Whereas Austin Pagansky,
he's shortening his bench.
Minutes.
Yeah, he's shortening his bench.
Pagansky is 7 minutes. McEachran's 9 minutes.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful here, especially with the compression of the schedule. You can't work your best players that much. Some guys have to step up. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much more simple you can make it for guys. And, listen, I'm not playing enough. Well, you know what? There's a reason why you're not playing enough. You're not doing your job. You're not doing what you're asked to do. You're not doing what the responsible requirements are to be a player. So these guys are making a huge mistake as far as their careers are concerned, because when you have an injury and if you can't take advantage of it, then, I'm sorry. We'll move on to somebody else.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, Claibs, I'm wondering if Ryan O'Reilly is putting so much pressure on himself right now as the captain. And I'm curious if you've seen this from former captains before who maybe got that first shot. Mm-hmm. Because first of all, his game hasn't changed. I mean, he's still picking up points. He is still one of the best players on the ice for Craig Berube. But it really looks like and sounds like after games that Ryan O'Reilly is putting so much pressure on himself to try and be the savior of this team that you're not getting the same Ryan O'Reilly that won the MVP of the Stanley Cup final a couple of years ago.
I agree wholeheartedly. You hit the nail right on the head. I think it's starting to show. Mm-hmm. And I was really reluctant on him having that letter. I think there's some guys who can lead by example. They don't need a letter on their sweater in order to say, hey, this guy, he's our captain. To me, captain at this point is who talks to the media.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that's the way it seems to me. And we are more enamored with it than anyone else, because I've seen players who weren't the best player on their team that ended up being captain.
Right.
And, but then I asked myself the question, who else can assume that leadership role? And I don't know who that would be. I think Ryan O'Reilly is a terrific person. And I'm not saying he's not worthy of the job. I've seen guys have this problem before. The Blues had a captain, gosh, this was 40 years ago, named Barry Gibbs. And they made him captain, and man, his career went down the tubes like that. I mean, he was getting booed, and I mean, it was hard to watch. And we've always given the captain to the best scorer.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brett Hull was the captain for a few years. Brett Hull probably wasn't what I would deem a great captain.
Yeah.
And then there was Brian Sutter, who was the epitome of toughness and leadership. And, there was Chris Pronger, who was the epitome of toughness and leadership. So it's a tough role to maintain, to do your job and then speak on behalf of 20 other guys. It's a tough job.
Well, and he puts so much on himself too. Like in the post games, you've heard them, Claibs. He sits at that podium and every answer is, well, I got to be better. I got to be better. And frankly, it's not just Ryan O'Reilly. It really feels like you have 5 or 6 guys on the ice that are going out there doing exactly what Craig Berube's system needs, but they're also trying to do it individually, right? Like,
yeah.
It's different than what 2018 was when they fired Mike Yeo. I don't see this team as individual contractors to where they're trying to just do it themselves. But what I do see is a bunch of guys who are saying, hey, we're down by a goal. These guys aren't going to help us. I got to go out there and I got to score a goal. And then you're turning into guys that are taking shots individually or trying to force passes in the middle rather than just putting pucks on net and getting those dirty goals.
It's amazing how we figured it out. I don't know why they haven't figured it out. Hey, I wanted to ask you about another situation before we get out of here.
Yeah, please.
You and I, about a month ago, maybe less than that, talked about how impressed we were with the Montreal Canadiens. I thought they were the best team out there.
Yeah.
They're so good that they fired their coach. And I think he's the first guy to get it this year, right? Claude Julien.
Yep.
First
and
guy
the assistant coach, Kirk Muller.
Yeah, Kirk Muller. Yeah, well, they came as a package deal.
Yeah.
And Muller had his crack at being head coach there. And the fact that he didn't speak French, we all knew he'd never get that job.
Right.
Where do you think things went wrong in Montreal? I mean, I know there's a lot of pressure, especially with them getting off to a great start. They haven't won a Stanley Cup since the mid-'90s. And by the way, the Montreal Canadiens are the last team in National Hockey League to have a team that was all North Americans to win the Stanley Cup.
Really?
Yeah, they were the last team.
That's impressive. That is really impressive.
Where do you think things have gone wrong? And was this a harbinger of things to come with respect to some other teams in the National Hockey League who are at a crossroads on whether they're in it or not? And do they feel like making a coaching change is going to turn things around?
Yeah, I do think you're going to see some other teams between now and the end of March that fire their coaches because they felt like they should have been better. In terms of Montreal, Claibs, as much as people want to blame Marc Bergevin, and I think he does have some of the blame for this because he has made trades when things haven't worked. He shipped Max Domi away when it wasn't working. He has shipped guys in and out of the lineup. He's also not given contracts to individual players. This, for me, was the last straw for Marc Bergevin in Montreal. This was his way of saying, okay, before I go, this is my last chance at winning a Stanley Cup with this team. But in my opinion, this has nothing to do with Claude Julien, has nothing to do with Kirk Muller, has nothing to do with Marc Bergevin. It has everything to do with Carey Price. When you pay a goaltender $11 million, unless he is Patrick Waugh, Marty Brodeur, and Grant Fuhr combined, he's going to hurt your team rather than help your team. Last night is a perfect example, Claibs. Montreal was up 2-0 with Carey Price in net. They lost that game 4-3 to the Winnipeg Jets because of their goaltending. So Carey Price has handcuffed that team financially in terms of making additions where they can make additions, and he hasn't been the best goaltender. Jake Allen has a better save percentage, has a better goals against, and has more wins and less opportunities of games started than Carey Price.
Well, there's two ways to look at that. The more Jake is exposed, the more those numbers might change. But the other thing here is, and you touch on something that probably needs to be addressed. You know, Carey Price they needed to go to him and say, we need to adjust your contract.
Right.
Where we can free up some money so we can help ourselves in some other areas. And you know, one of the things I'm seeing about a lot of goalies this year, Alex, they're just making one less good save than they normally would. We see it with Jordan Bennington. He gives up I won't say a soft goal, but a goal he knows he could have back. Right. There's some where a guy gets a one-timer from the weak side and beats him, boom. Okay, I get it. You couldn't stop that. But when you get the ones that go between your elbow and your sweater, or one that nicks off of your goalie pad, or things like that, the ones you know he can save.
Right.
I see that more in this league now, around the league, where guys are not making that one save that's costing their hockey team a game.
And it's dipping heads. I mean, Bennington's a perfect example. That goal that you're referring to, at least if I'm guessing on this right, it was that first game against the LA Kings, Claibs. It was a fluttering puck that bounces off of his shoulder, his helmet, and then goes into the back of the net.
Yeah.
As soon as that happened, the one thing we saw was a head dip on the Blues team. And like, my gosh, are you kidding me?
Here we go again. Yeah,
exactly. It's the same thing that we saw a couple of years ago when this team was at the bottom of the league. Yeah.
When Jake Allen would give up those bad goals, you would just say, well, here we go again.
And I think it's accelerated with a Montreal team, because you have all of these younger players that are paid very handsomely, but these are younger guys that are trying to build this core. Get a couple of veterans like a Jeff Petrie and a Shea Weber, but your most veteran guy is in between the pipes and Carey Price. So if a puck gets past him that shouldn't get past him, people are thinking, oh gosh, here we go again. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the culture is right now in Montreal, where Marc Bergevin said, hey, if we get rid of Claude Julien, we could bring in a younger coach who can kind of change the mindset. It's the Craig Berube effect, right? I mean, that's what happens now for teams. But I just, for me, Montreal is never going to have that opportunity to win the cup if they keep Carey Price, because they have to pay him $10.5 million over the next 3 years each year.
Yeah, I'd have to get a little salary help from him.
Yeah.
You know, here's the other challenge that they run into. And I mentioned this about Muller. You know, when you coach the Montreal Canadiens, you have to be able to speak French and fluently. So your pool of coaches is reduced dramatically as far as guys that they can go to. And I would be hard pressed to ask 10 people, did they know who the guy is that they replaced Claude Julien with? I mean, wasn't a former player. Was a guy who had a good resume as far as in the minors and in the juniors, but this is Montreal Canadiens. This is like asking, oh gosh, I'm trying to make a comparison to another sport of asking somebody who had no prior experience in baseball to come manage the Cardinals.
Right.
And Mike Schilt is a guy who was a baseball lifer. Okay. I mean, he managed a lot of these guys that are on the team. But in this situation, you know, the language barrier wasn't an issue. Now, granted, he was a manager of the year who never played one inning in the majors, but he had assembled enough of a resume where people felt like he knew what he was doing. In this situation, this gentleman may know what he's doing, but it's a good thing he can speak French.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that working for you, it's going to be tough. So I'm going to keep my eye on that. This team is still good enough to compete. How they jumpstart, it'll be a big question, but I agree. Carey Price has got to be a hair better than what we've seen him here recently.
Can I just say this, Claibs? How are we at a stage where we have to have a French-speaking coach for Montreal if they want to have success? Where, I mean, you could have a translator from a guy who speaks English to French.
Doesn't work. The Quebec province is a very proud and in some cases insistent upon being recognized. You know, every 20 years they always want to secede from Canada,
of course,
because they feel like they're being mistreated. And I get it; they don't want to lose their heritage, but their requirements sometimes put them in a tough situation.
Yeah, especially, I mean, think of the coaches that you miss out on an opportunity to win with. I mean, there's a guy named Gerard Gallant who's just sitting around right now who took his team to a Stanley Cup final in his first year. So it's a tough position to be in, and I think Mark Bergevin is feeling that pressure. But again, I don't know if there's anything he can do with this team, but you're right. It's a team to keep a close eye on and just kind of see what happens over these next couple of weeks. And I think the same can be said for the Blues. Claibs, they're out on a 6-game road trip as we wrap up here. You take on San Jose, you take on Anaheim, you take on LA for 6 games. And to me, my last thought here, and I'd like yours as well, this is a road trip that you got to keep your head above water, because if you come out of this road trip without points, you could be looking at a uphill battle that I don't know you can fight your way back into.
I agree with you. I think you have to go at least 4-2 on this road trip.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start to assert yourself more. They've been given too many passes, and I understand the injury factor. I get that, but good teams find a way to play through it. And if, as I said earlier, if you're a young player and you get ice time,
yeah,
and I think, your first 2 shifts are going to decide your fate most nights. That's how coaches evaluate. Hey, if this guy's hot and if he's coming out, he's got the jump we're looking for, guess what? I'm going to give him another shift. And if he keeps doing it, then he's going to continue to play. If he doesn't, then all of a sudden he's going to get every 6th or 7th shift. He's going to have maybe 2 to 4 minutes in a period. And all of a sudden he's a guy that's not going to be in the equation in the 3rd period.
Yep. And that's a battle that you can't win in games, and that's where your guys get gassed.
I got news for you. You know what? Maybe if one of these new guys went out and hit somebody and played the body where they'd be noticed more, that never hurts. It never hurts, and it also jumpstarts your team. And if he's got a scrap or he gets to chirping at somebody, that's great. I don't have a problem with that. That's what you got Kyle Clifford over there for anyway. Mm-hmm. So, if I know that Clifford's dressed out and I'm one of these new guys, I'm going to run somebody. Yep. And I wish somebody would run me, because I got this guy sitting over here and he knows what his job is and he'll handle it for me. And then I can go out and play more hockey.
It's exactly what he was brought here to do. And if I'm those guys sitting on the bench that want more ice time, my perfect example is an Ivan Barbashev. And Ivan Barbashev, who's playing the 4th line, he gets put up to the 1st line when injuries happen.
Playing his best hockey too.
Yeah, he plays the way Craig Berube wants him to play. So if I'm doing anything, I'm talking to coaches and say, how do I take Claibs? This has been a lot of fun, buddy. Hopefully we've solved the Blues problems and we can get back on a win streak when we talk next.
I'll sleep better over it. I don't know about the Blues, but I will. Hey, listen, this will be our last visit before you become a daddy. Best of luck and good health to you and your family. And the next time we see you, we won't recognize you because you won't have a Chris Thorburn beard.
That is true. It's going to be clean shaven. I'm going to look like a new man, Claibs.
You'll feel like one too.
That's Mike Claiborne. I'm Alex Ferrario. Thank you for joining us on the Ferrario Face-Off. We will be back with you next time for more Blues and NHL talk right here at Claibs Online.